Well, welcome back. It's been a hot minute. I don't think I've done any of these since the Stanley Cup Final was still going, but there really wasn't a whole lot to talk about since the Miramanov extension and the rumors that Riley Smith might be getting inked again. There hasn't really been a whole lot to talk about. That was until yesterday when the schedule came out. Now, it does feel like we just finished playing, just finished beating the tar out of St. Louis in game 82 of the year and drinking heavily, realizing we're not going to be seeing any playoff hockey this year. But that's in the past, and now we have to look to the future. It was weird. It is crazy to think that the schedule is out now, but I'll take it. We know who we play in the preseason, being LA, Colorado, and Arizona, 2 times apiece. But this really isn't about the preseason because we all know the preseason doesn't really mean anything. And I'll do a whole separate breakdown of what the preseason will look like when the preseason starts to roll around. But really, this is all about the 2022-23 regular season. And so it only took me about 5 seconds of scrolling through the schedule to notice a few things. First being that we're going to get off to a relatively easy-ish start this time around. Last year was a rocky start, and we played a lot of really, really good teams in the first 2 months of the season. Over the first 24 games of this coming regular season, we only played 8 teams that made the playoffs last year, which is crazy to consider given the level of play. But what that means in retrospect and in essence is that we need to get off to a really, really hot start this year, bank points while we can, because the advantage of playing the weak teams in the beginning is you can get off to a hot start, but that has its drawbacks, meaning you have to play everybody eventually, which means that we're going to get to those more difficult opponents at a less opportune time, albeit in the middle of the season when, a lot more things could have gone wrong for them, but also for us if we're going to use last year as a barometer for what the worst case scenario is. The only concern that I have about this quote-unquote soft start is that we spend 9 of the first 15 games on the road, which is a tough way to start, including 3 of the first 4 games of the season are all going to be played away from the friendly confines of T-Mobile Arena. But, every game is important, and we learned that last year. 2 points is 2 points, but there are a couple of games that, on the quick glance at the schedule, I think are more important than others. Obviously, opening up with the home opener on October 13th against the Blackhawks, game 2 of the season. I know, I really wish we opened at home too. We got spoiled with that the last couple of years opening up at home, but alas, we're going to have to travel first before we come home and, see some friendly faces. And it doesn't take long for the matchups to really tick up because on October 22nd, the Colorado Avalanche are going to come to town. And that's really what the optimist and what the optimist in me and also the money line is saying, that that's likely going to be next year's conference final for the West. And so seeing those guys go face-to-face, toe-to-toe in T-Mobile right off the bat will be a really good way to see, 1, where we are coming out of the offseason and if we're ready, and 2, if Colorado is going to be as good as they were this year. Early is not fully indicative of what the season's going to handle, but at the same time, it's not to be taken lightly. And given that they're one of our first unnecessarily strong opponents of the year, that'll be one to definitely mark your calendar on. Another one to mark your calendar on, and it has almost nothing to do with the players and almost nothing to do with the fact that it's a good matchup, will be Bruce Cassidy's return to Boston. Now, we make a trip up the eastern seaboard to Boston. We play them on December 5th. Now, that's going to be a fun time because, I'm sure they're going to do a nice Jumbotron message. And then, Boston comes to town on the 11th down in Vegas. So really, there won't be a lot of time for there to be much love lost, given that there's a whopping 6 days between games. We get off to a really, really difficult start when the calendar will roll over from 2022 to 23, with the Golden Knights having to play Colorado, Pittsburgh, LA, Florida, Edmonton, and Dallas, your first 6 games after the new year. Now, I remember just as much as everybody else did where we were sitting on New Year's Day 2022 in first place of the Pacific Division. And that's where we were sitting at the All-Star break too. So we got off to a relatively shaky start in the new year. I think we went something like 500 from January 1st to the end of the season, which is somewhat concerning given that we have this really difficult start against all playoff teams to start the new year. But it's really not the end of the world. And we get to cap off that really tough start to the new year by welcoming back former coach Pete DeBoer to the Fortress on January 15th when the Dallas Stars roll into town. It's crazy how late we're going to go into the season without playing Dallas, given how much of an interesting rivalry we've kind of forged with them over the last couple of years, especially last year, dogfighting with them to try and get into the playoffs. But, it's going to happen. And we knew that our old coach was going to come back eventually if he got picked up. And he comes back twice pretty early in the new year. And then we go out to Dallas right at the end of the season in game 79. So there won't be a lot of time for us to exactly move on from Pete, but there'll be enough time for Butch to prove himself that he's the better coach and we made the right decision going with him, given that he'll have the entire front half of the calendar to essentially make that clear to the fan bases and to ourselves. There is one weird scheduling thing that really jumped out at me when I'm looking at the end, because last year taught me that we may have to pay attention to the schedule down the stretch. We may be pushing for a playoff spot. Fingers crossed that we aren't. But I looked ahead just to see what we got, and there's some weirdness at the end. We have in the last 10 games of the year, we played 2 home and homes against Minnesota and Seattle. Seattle, we play them in game 81 and game 82, which is a really, really weird way to cap off the season. Playing a game in Seattle and then 2 nights later playing in the Fortress to cap off the regular year. And we do the same thing with Minnesota 2 weeks prior to that. So that's an interesting way to cap off the season. It's the same song and dance with Minnesota. It's going to be interesting, and it's going to be a lot of one that's a good opportunity to get points, assuming Seattle doesn't make any major steps this offseason. And judging by where they're sitting right now, they're not really in a position to do so. So one way of looking at it is it's 4 free points at the end of the year, but another way of looking at it is that's what we thought San Jose was at the end of last season, but look where that got us. We only got one of those 2, and those would have been really, really helpful in the grand scheme of things. So all in all, the schedule it's a schedule. We don't really know who's going to be good until we know. And with the draft tonight, who knows? Teams could look drastically different when we wake up tomorrow morning. And then with free agency less than a week away, our team is only just now starting to shape up. We've got so many RFAs that need to be dealt with that it is interesting to be looking at the schedule before we even know what the roster is. But now for a step back on my thoughts of the schedule, it's a light start with a very grueling middle third, where we need to win the games that we need to take advantage of early in the season when we play all those, let's face it, not equally as talented teams. When we play Buffalo, when we play San Jose, when we play Ottawa, when we're playing teams that aren't really in the playoff picture. We need to take advantage and get the points that we can against those teams, which ropes me into one of my bigger thoughts for what we need to do with the schedule. It's the team, Golden Knights, need to win the games they're supposed to win, lose the ones we have no chance in, and try and steal a couple along the way. With 41 home games and 41 road games, there's bound to be at least 10 games or 15 games where we have absolutely no chance in, getting woefully outplayed and or we're resting starters or injuries, the lot. Even heck, if Logan Thompson has to take a mental health day and we have to call up Yuri Patera or something, I don't know. There are going to be some games where we're just not going to be competitive. And there are some games, like when we're playing Buffalo, that we need to put 8 in the net and move on to the next opponent. And that was something that was sorely missing last year. I know injuries and roster stability were a major factor in our inability to have true blowout wins, with exception to the last one. But it's just one of those things that under this new coach and under our newly, I wouldn't even want to say new, but more charged ownership group with Foley taking a more invested amount of energy into the team, it's clear that the team is going to be playing up to level a lot more. And this mentality, I'm sure what I just said has been said in conference rooms all throughout Henderson and all throughout the Vegas Golden Knights management system. So this isn't really a new idea and the ramblings of a random YouTuber, but this is just the way it is. That's the way that you get points in the National Hockey League. So yeah, that's the schedule. It's exciting that we already know when we're going to play, who we're going to play. Believe me, I'm already looking at tickets to go see a couple games because I love seeing them. But at the end of the day, it's now we know who we got to take care of business with, and when the party gets to get started again in early October when we host the Blackhawks, it's going to be a really good time, and I'm definitely excited to get the season going. I've already missed hockey, and it's even made even worse by the fact that we've had to spend the last 2 weeks watching the Colorado Avalanche basically destroy the Stanley Cup. It's starting to resemble more of a tin can than the greatest trophy in sports. So I'm sure we take better care of it. So we'll be taking that next year. Thank you very much, Colorado. Yeah, with that being said, before free agency, I'm gonna probably do a breakdown of what I think is gonna happen when we roll into July 13th. I know predictions are hard because I wanted to wait and get through the draft, see if any trades happen, see if we trade up or down, and if we do anything special. And if anything crazy happens, I might do a draft recap. But truth be told, I don't know enough about the prospects to do anything like that. So really, I'll just be reading what people like Elliot Friedman and everybody, and Elliot Friedman and Jesse Granger say. Minds that are way smarter than me when it comes to all things hockey and all things Golden Knights. So once the draft day is through, I'll start working on I'll start working on my free agency predictions, who I think is going to stay, who I think is going to go, what I think the roster is going to look like when preseason inevitably starts, and ultimately when we lace them up to start the season in October. So until next time, I will be keeping myself busy trying to produce more content for you guys. And I'll see you guys in the next one.